The Void War is a cinematic universe that's 2 parts Lego, 1 part clay, and all parts sci-fi fantasy horror. With origins in the Lego zombie apocalypse, the latest epic expression of this universe was the 90-minute feature film Gray Horizons, which takes place in the year 3044 of the Void War timeline. With such a time jump from the Outbreak in the year 2107, there is a lot of lore to unpack for fans of the universe. In this 3-part series, I'm going to break down the most significant events of this apocalyptic timeline and describe some of the most important figures, species, and entities involved. Considering there are 2 more films in the works, know that there will be some spoilers. Consider yourself warned. In the year 2107, Earth was besieged by the affliction that would come to be known as Slag. It is difficult to overstate the horror of this global event. In the course of 1 year, nearly 85% of the human population was consumed by the ever-spreading mass of fleshy nightmare fuel. The few who survived had to live with the memory of their friends and family becoming grotesquely corrupted beyond recognition. In addition to those traumatic memories, the survivors faced a future that was bleak beyond imagination. Their home had become blanketed by a deadly, mindless mass of hell flesh. But who was responsible? Few would come to know the truth, but a small faction of civilians and TCF personnel uncovered part of the mystery. The infectious aspect of Slag, an organic fluid called Ak, or Aka fluid, was brought to Earth by an alien race known as the Exen. The origin of these reptilian beings is unknown, but it is clear that their advanced technology and biology allowed them to weaponize Slag. The source of their power was a hybrid brain that gave the Exen control over the localized hive mind. But when that brain was destroyed, it shattered the minds of all the Exen connected to it. Slag was left to spread on its own as the Exen's reign on Earth came to a swift end, never to return. For now. At the time of the outbreak, the largest military organization was the Terror Counter Force, or TCF. This was an international military complex composed of 7 major nations, with the stated purpose of responding to global threats. Their initial response to the outbreak involved massive deployment of ground forces in an attempt to kill the alien entities on an individual basis. Their success was limited. Things spiraled out of control, particularly in major cities. Communications began to break down as military stations and society at large fell apart. Things got dark fast, and a number of military forces, including the TCF, switched to a sort of last resort strategy. The surviving military forces consolidated in tightly guarded strongholds and began heavily bombing the areas of highest Slag concentration. This proved effective against sparsely corrupted areas, but highly ineffective in regards to densely corrupted areas. It would take decades and countless human lives before the reason for this was truly understood. As strongholds fell and communities of survivors grew thin, an unexpected flicker of hope emerged amidst the catastrophic destruction. Rumors of a powerful entity began circulating. It was described as a god by some, a spirit by others, and by some as a demon. But in time, its name was known everywhere. Kyo. Survivors began leaving their communities in search of Kyo and his wandering army. It was rumored that Kyo stood 5 meters tall, wielded a sword, and was covered with a white armor that was as hard as diamond. Survivors who encountered Kyo discovered something even stranger. Kyo bore no weapons, but used psychic abilities to decimate Slag. He wore no armor, but his own white flesh seemed to be composed of indestructible and unknown material. He was far from human, and didn't even use speech to communicate. He guided his forces using telepathic communication and suggestion, and seemed to be capable of downloading information into humans. These downloads often served the purpose of helping humans design and build technologies that had never been seen before. By the year 2133, 26 years after the outbreak, Kyo's forces had amassed thousands of individuals. However, their fighting forces were still ill-equipped and disorganized. The initiative of several former TCF personnel, paired with Kyo's ability to organize and direct, led to the establishment of the Unum Vires, Kyo's one force. Nicknamed the Fists of Kyo, the Unum Vires was equipped with leftover and refurbished TCF weapons and equipment. For the first time, significant fighting forces began liberating small areas independently of Kyo. This had mixed results. These smaller forces invariably encountered dense dens of slag, and the psychic fields produced by slag often compromised the soldiers. Kyo himself was highly effective at eradicating slag, but he needed more firepower to combat the spread of corruption. After years of keeping an eye out for natural leaders and effective fighters amongst his ranks, he handpicked 30 individuals for a unique opportunity. They would be augmented and cybernetically enhanced to combat slag, and would be injected with a questionable substance called dihexylate, which would protect their minds against the psychic attacks of slag. This team became known as the Archangels. The Archangels quickly became the stuff of legend. They were the tip of the spear in countless liberations. Their cybernetic enhancements, advanced beamer weaponry, and psychic protection allowed them to penetrate the deepest slag dens, destroying even giant slag with almost no casualties. This was a second flicker of hope for survivors who followed Kyo. It truly seemed that humans might reclaim their home for good. Given the effectiveness of the Archangels, the rest of Kyo's forces soon adapted a similar version of their technology for widespread use. This led to the first true Unum Vires regiment, and paved the way for all Unum Vires forces to come. But the rate of liberation was still painfully slow, considering most of the planet's populated areas were riddled with slag. It would take more than guns to truly eliminate the threat at hand. A decade or so after Kyo began his Great Crusade, an unprecedented phenomenon occurred within his liberated communities. Children born after the first year of liberation began to exhibit strange abilities during puberty. The people brought this to Kyo, who assured them it was a great gift to humanity. He took these children under his wing, giving them psychic downloads and teaching them how to wield these gifts. Over the next few decades, a wide variety of abilities rose to the surface. Some had a defensive nature, while others were more on the offensive side. Some abilities were neither, including powers such as telepathy, astral projection and vision, and memory scans. It is worth noting that only 5% of children born seemed to possess this psychic potential, and of that 5%, almost all of them were women. Males born with abilities were exceptionally rare, but when they did emerge, their abilities often developed early and with a greater potency than average. Interpreting Kyo's downloads and teachings, these psychics began to refer to themselves as channelers. By the year 2145, there were dozens of channelers who had reached adulthood. They began to use their abilities in combat against slag, and proved incredibly effective at protecting soldiers from psychic attack and assisting them with offensive capabilities. Those with neither defensive nor offensive capabilities dedicated themselves to learning and teaching these so-called astral arts, and the first Channeler Academy was established. This was the beginning of the Channeler's Ring, or Unum series. Humanity was growing in numbers and strength. Though Kyo's forces had remained nomadic for decades, they began to split and settle in liberated areas, using Kyo's gifted technology and power to reboot society much more quickly than would otherwise have been possible. It was the beginning of a new age. Stay tuned for the next video, where I will discuss the events of the Kyonic Crusade, which spanned hundreds of years after the outbreak. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out the Gray Horizons movie on Amazon, Patreon, or on my channel for channel members.
Hey, Dane.
Thanks for watching.
Infested.
I need another route.
Another route? What, you don't know your way around?
So, we're lost.
You don't have to follow me, you know.
We're not alone
make it. There's no way.